Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, smug, entitled bosses are getting taught lessons, and Opie tells the tale about the time a nasty boss fires them, only to realize that Opie was the most important person in the company. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. Years ago, I worked for an awesome company that understood workplace culture, and fun was a huge part in keeping employees happy and productive. In our office, people would often cycle to work, and therefore, they needed to shower and get ready at work. That meant that sometimes they didn't get to their desk until after 9 a.m. However, everyone worked back without being asked to deliver on deadlines. Management didn't care because they knew the work was being done and everyone always went over and above. Enter the new HR manager. We had never really had one before, but we were growing, so we needed one. Within her first few weeks, she sends out an email saying that everyone needs to be seated and ready to go at 9 a.m. sharp, and that we need to stop having social chats and getting ready at work. Or if we did, do it earlier. She never acknowledged the fact that everyone put in unpaid overtime. So cue the mass malicious compliance. Everyone would start at 9 a.m. as per the email and then leave at 5 p.m. Projects start running behind and clients start getting pissed off because their product was not being delivered on time. The new HR manager was confused as to why work was not being delivered on time anymore. As people were starting on time, she made sure of it. Needless to say, upper management removed the rule and she quit shortly after. We all went back to our normal ways, and wouldn't you know it, projects were back on track. Don't walk into a new company and try to change something that isn't broken. The people will revolt. That is exactly it. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And just from reading dozens of bad bosses posts, guys, like the amount of new bosses that come into a well-run company and think they know better than the long-time employees and end up destroying the place is baffling. Like, it's just amazing how well a company can run when employees are actually happy. So this one's a short one, but it's the story of how I grew a backbone. This happened a few years ago. At the time, I worked at a cheap chain restaurant. There's 3 total in my county here. It's also important to note that the company was founded in a northern state of the US, and they are headquartered there. Well, one year, hurricane season was in full swing, and a right monster of one was looking to make a direct hit. Now, I've lived in the state most of my life, and anything below a Category 3 is just an annoyance. But this sucker was a Category 4, and it was several days out. Everyone in the county was freaking out. Landfall is supposed to be Friday, and it's Monday. Everything was selling out quickly, which just made people more panicked. My house is older and not very strong, so I'm very worried. And of course, everyone at work's wondering when our store is going to close. So on Monday, several employees, including myself, are concerned that people were scheduled for Friday. I brought it up with Karen from management, and Karen says, we have to get authorization from headquarters to close. So for now, you will all be working. This is when I speak up and say, well, do they understand it's a Category 4? I need to get packed up and go to my boyfriend's house. This is when she responds, if we remain open and you can't come to work, you'll have to find somebody to cover your shift. So on Tuesday, we hear that the other 2 stores are being closed because they're both in mandatory evacuation areas. This is when my coworker says, why are we still going to be open even though the other 2 are closing? Karen says they have to close. We don't. Headquarters hasn't authorized it. So for now, everyone will be working. I just say, okay, but just because the store is in a safe location doesn't mean the roads getting here will be. We need to close. She then says, look, I'm not happy either, but we have to wait for headquarters. So on Wednesday morning, several people are calling out already, or just flat out quitting. She then says, okay, just a reminder to everyone that if you're a no-call, no-show, you will be fired. I expect better of all of you. We will keep working until we're authorized to close. I speak up and say, seriously, headquarters is keeping us open? She says, well, they said that since the storm's supposed to hit the next town over, we're not closing. This is when I say, do they understand how a hurricane even works? This is all over the news. Everyone's supposed to evacuate if they're able to. She then tells us, well, we're having a conference call with them tomorrow morning, and we'll make the decision then. I then ask, and if they say no, then what? She then tells me, then you have to show up or be fired. You have a job to do. So during that shift, myself and most of the employees joined together, and we said we would all call out. They can't fire everyone at once, right? So one by one, we go into the office and we told management that we won't be coming in until Monday or we quit. And since it was show up in the middle of a hurricane or be fired, those who weren't working that day called in and said the same. Well, they had that conference call very early Thursday morning, and lo and behold, headquarters was gracious enough to allow us to close. The only issue is that management now had to prepare the building by themselves, being that the rest of us had already gone inland or to shelters. We would have been glad to help on Tuesday or Wednesday when we actually had time to do so. But no, neither management nor corporate wanted to listen to reason. We were extremely lucky, as the storm turned away literally at the last minute, and we were spared the worst of it. However, when the next hurricane came around, corporate was very quick to tell us to close days before landfall. Honestly, I have no idea why it took that long to authorize the close. Like, it's a frickin' hurricane and everyone's being told to evacuate. I don't think anyone's going to a chain restaurant to eat. That said though, absolutely wild though. Like, imagine getting paid minimum wage and being told by your boss that you have to work during a natural disaster. No freaking thanks. Okay, so I'm a professional chef, and I have been for a few years. And in Australia, apprentice chefs are trained in a college where we learn about 150 recipes. Now, many of the recipes are provided to students in bulky, finicky booklets that you won't really want to take anywhere with you. So I started writing some of the recipes in a separate notebook, along with some other recipes I'd learned from my coworkers or family members. I created a sort of a pseudo cookbook, and I would often bring this book into the kitchen, so I would remember ingredient quantities and cooking times, and eventually, I would leave the book in the kitchen pretty much around the clock. What I soon found out was that some other chefs in the kitchen were using my cookbook to check official recipes for the restaurant we worked for. This restaurant was a part of a popular sports club in the local area, so consistency was extremely important to management. As such, having a written record of the new recipes or changes to long-time recipes was very important. As it turned out, management had stopped making changes to the official club recipe book a few months before I started, so my book became the de facto official recipe book. For a while, this was no issue to me. I just kept adding new recipes to it throughout the next few years. However, after my third year working there, I finished my studies and I became a fully qualified chef, so I suddenly became more expensive to keep on as a staff member. As such, management started looking for any reason to replace me with a new apprentice. Eventually, they found somebody to replace me and gave a half-assed reason for firing me. They told me to take all of my things and leave, as I could no longer offer what they were looking for. So I took everything I owned and left, including the notebook with all the club's recipes. For a few days, not a whole lot happened, but slowly, the club's reviews started complaining about bland food, dry cakes, inconsistent classic recipes, and every other food-related thing you could think of. At one point, there was 50 negative reviews in a single day, which for our town was a massive amount of negative reviews in a day. It felt damn good, since I felt they deserved it and they left me unemployed on short notice. I was quickly offered a new job by a smaller restaurant, whose owner knew me from the sports club kitchen. Here's the malicious compliance. So after about a week, I received multiple calls, and after answering one, it was one of the higher-up managers at the sports club, asking if I could return the book to the kitchen as they needed it back. Now, I obviously laughed, and I said firmly that it was my book, full of my recipes, so it wasn't going anywhere near them, reminding them that they had told me, quote, that I could no longer offer what they were looking for. Hearing that, the manager began to panic as he offered me my job back. He said, just let bygones be bygones, you can start Monday. I already had a new job, so I completely brushed off this offer and I ignored him. I hung up pretty soon after that. I then start putting the recipes from my book on the new restaurant's menu, and it was beginning to attract a few regular customers of the sports club, so I quickly found myself with more and more responsibility and command within the kitchen. It actually got to the point that about a third of the menu was from my book. Now, this slow trickle of sports club regulars picked up speed after about 3 months, and that led to several high-level managers from the club deciding to visit the restaurant I'd helped build, and virtually demanded that I give them my cookbook, claiming it would be much more beneficial for the community if they had it. My head chef just laughed in their faces and told them to piss off. It's been about 2 years, and my head chef and I have a very good relationship, and the customer base we have at the restaurant is better than ever. Now, we didn't take every customer from the big club, but it was enough to damage their profits, and also led to a decent bit of damage to one of the higher managers' reputations. Furthermore, the recipe issues and negative reviews led to the majority of the kitchen quitting, and according to one of my old colleagues, they cited the lack of support and organization from upper management as the final reasons people quit. This led to an even larger dip in the quality of the restaurant food. I also get paid significantly more at this restaurant than I was at the sports club, so yeah, life is good. Oh, I freaking love this post so much, guys, and I just want to say they absolutely deserved it. Like, firing someone because they're getting too expensive is the worst mistake a company can make. Like, what's that saying? Save a penny, lose a dollar. I bet the boss regretted that big time, and I hope OP was grinning ear to ear knowing the company was running horribly without them. And here's the thing, like, if OP had taken their old job back, they'd probably copy the recipe book and then find another excuse to get rid of OP in a few months. You can't trust a crappy boss, especially one that says, let's let bygones be bygones. Like, that's just saying, I screwed you over, now please come back and help me. So I used to work in media intelligence, which is really a niche market in the country that I'm from. I started as an assistant, and I learned everything from scratch, as I switched from the hospitality industry. Pretty big step, I know. I was eager to learn, and I was really interested in what they do, as I was trying to get into media back then. First of all, as I learned everything from scratch, I got really good at what I do after just 6 months of working there. I was in a 3-person team, and I had one of the best bosses and a really good colleague, which were veterans in the industry. Both of them helped me a lot. They then left the company after just a year, as upper management was just plain hot garbage. The company had 4 changes in direction within a year, and it was stressing my team out. They did ask me to leave with them, but with me being young and naive, trying to prove myself, I declined. After my boss and colleague left, it was just me and my team, and I was in charge of a few markets. I was asked to be on call for technical support, and I wasn't offered anything in return. At the time, I was pissed, but I was also trying to prove myself, so I obliged. I got really stressed out from working 13 hours a day for a few months. And at that point, I kept asking my manager to hire more people, as I can't be working like this as it's stressing me out. My manager just went on and on, saying they don't have the budget for it, so I just forgot about it, drowning myself in work. One day, the CEO of the company came and we had dinner, as he was growing close to me since I was the only person left who actually knew the ins and outs of the old and new system the company used. Now keep in mind, this CEO is a cheapskate and he'll try all and every way to screw you over. The guy asked me what I wanted to change in the company during dinner, so I start off with asking him for 2 new hires for my team, where he gave me the same answer as my manager. So I asked him for a promotion and a raise, which he also declined, saying, "You don't have the necessary experience yet." I was pissed, and as a normal person would expect, after working 13-hour days for months, you would need rest. I had almost 3 weeks of paid time off saved, and I needed the rest. Well, the manager threatened to fire me if I took any paid time off, as no one was able to do what I did. I took the PTO anyways, I got well rested, and all was good until I came back. There were 2 new faces, and I was pretty confused. So I asked my manager who they were, and she told me that they were my replacements. She then told me that my notice was 2 months, and I had to train them before I leave. She couldn't do anything, as I was the only one in the company who knew how to run the systems. So realistically, she couldn't say that I wasn't training them properly, as she didn't know how things work. And here's where the malicious compliance happens. Since the manager didn't know how things work, she told me to train the interns on the legacy systems to know better, on how the company was built up, and I did just that. She told me strictly to just train the interns on the legacy, and she'll be dealing with the rest. And I thought, sure, I'll do just that. It wasn't until my last week there when crap really hit the fan. My manager found out that I've only been giving training on the legacy system, and I didn't give them my notes with tips on how to run the system that needed to be used for daily operations. So with that, my manager calls the CEO and the managing director to hold a meeting with me, asking why I didn't train my replacements properly. I just told them that I did what my manager told me to do, which the manager denied until I showed them the email that my manager sent me, which resulted in the call promptly ending. After I left the company, I was patiently waiting for the call that was bound to come. It was my manager. She demanded I get back to work, and she said the firing was just a prank, blah blah blah. I told them, pay me my triple wage and I'll consider it. They called me crazy and ended the call. It's been 2 months now since that call, and based on a good friend from another department, my old manager is neck deep in this crap show. LOL, did OP's manager really beg OP to stay at work, saying the firing was just a prank? Like, what a ridiculous thing to say, not to mention so unprofessional that it's mind-boggling. But yeah, what a crappy thing to do to OP, basically firing them for taking PTO, for being overstressed, and then forcing them to stay for 2 months to train new people. If I were in OP's shoes, I would be out of there as soon as those words left her mouth. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous that you think I'm putting in any effort after being fired. So I used to work in a hotel as a porter. We had to wear white shirts and black pants, and they provided us with a uniform, which was just a nondescript black vest. I worked there part-time, but also had another part-time job at the post office. I told them about the second job before they hired me. They asked me what I'd do about conflicting shifts, and I said that I would work for whatever company booked my time first. So if the post office said they wanted me next week on Wednesday to Saturday, and then later the hotel asked me to work that time, I would say I was unavailable. Now, I honored that agreement the entire time I worked for them, and it wasn't a problem for over a year. And then, one day, I get told by the hotel that I have to work an upcoming weekend. I said I couldn't accept the shift because I'd already booked one at my second place of work. This is when my hotel boss said, well, this is a huge contract. We have a massive wedding taking place on the same weekend as a large conference. We need all hands on deck. So I remind them once again that I couldn't accept a shift if it conflicted with the one I previously booked. My boss then got real annoyed and pushy and tried the whole "we have to be able to rely on you" BS spiel. So I reminded him that they could only rely on me doing exactly what I promised in my interview, and that they had been able to rely on me for over a year. I also pointed out that it's not reasonable to demand that I work a shift I hadn't agreed to work. My boss was still pissy when he hung up. Now, they don't fire me, but for over the next month, I couldn't help but notice that I never got any shift offers. It became obvious that I was being fired without actually being told I was fired. I called several times and asked if there were any shifts, but I was told we have nothing for you at this time. So I checked with my friends who worked at the hotel, and they all said that business was normal, and they couldn't see any reason I wasn't being offered shifts. No worries, I had just picked up more shifts at the post office, and they paid me almost twice as much, so cool by me. Another couple of weeks go by, and my direct supervisor at the hotel calls me to ask for my uniform vest back. I just asked why, saying I hadn't been fired, so as far as I know, I still work there. My boss just kept sidestepping my question and refused to answer, and refused to admit that I had been fired. He just kept saying, "We need that uniform, you have to give it back." So I say, "No problem." He then starts saying, "You can drop it off anytime." And that's when I interrupt him to say, "No, I won't be dropping it off." He stopped for a moment, flustered, and then said, "But you have to, it's part of your employment contract." This is when I reply, yes, I know, I read the contract. It merely states that I have to return the uniform when requested. It doesn't say I have to deliver it to you, so I won't. You can send someone to pick it up at a time that's convenient to me. And here's the thing, the hotel was in a different city from my hometown, so it was about a half-hour to 45-minute drive to my place. My ex-boss tried to bully me, but it's funny how since I no longer worked for him, it shifted our power balance. The guy sputtered and stammered as he tried to figure out some way to goad or coerce me into driving the vest to him, but he finally gave up. He said he'd send someone sometime, so be ready for whenever that is. I told him no, he would have to contact me to pre-arrange a time that was convenient to me. I said I'd check my calendar and he could call me back in a couple of days to make arrangements. And that is petty, I know. But hearing the exasperation and annoyance in his tone as we spoke was very, very enjoyable. He never did send anyone to pick up the vest, so I end up using it as a part of a Halloween costume. Zombie Hotel Porter. I friggin' love that OP stood their ground against that a-hole boss, and I only wish OP said to the guy, your failure to plan is not my emergency. And the whole return the vest thing but never sending someone to retrieve it, I'm pretty sure that's the boss's way of trying to get a bit of revenge on OP. Like the guy literally wanted the satisfaction of being able to snap his fingers and to see OP jump through hoops one last time before they part ways. And seriously, I think we can all agree, F bosses like that. I especially love how OP uses the vest as a Halloween costume. So this happened a couple of years ago. I was working on a part-time basis in a small firm owned by friends. The pay wasn't very good, but the atmosphere was, and I was allowed to set my own timings, so life was good overall. And then a friend, whom I'd known only through social media, approached me for a job at her company. Even though they were offering good money, I turned down the offer, as I knew I could not get the benefits I was getting in my current job. Plus, the commute to the new office was very long. I would have to travel 2 hours one way, and then change 3 trains just to reach the office. A month later, the HR of the new firm approaches me again. They offered me almost 4 times the money I was making and that I could set my own work hours. There was also extra pay for working overtime and on weekends. This was important, so I joined the new company. My friend didn't know the terms of the new agreement I had with HR. She used to act like I owed her big time for the opportunity I got. So one day, I correct her. I told her that I turned down the offer she'd been a part of, and 1 month later, I had my own negotiations, and I got much more favorable terms. So I was here because her company really needed me, and not because of her. Now, I didn't share the details of my agreement with her, but we both realized that she was making significantly lesser than me. This totally changes her attitude towards me. Now she wanted me out, and I was determined to stick through it for at least a year. So she decided that she would make it very difficult for me to work, so that I would quit on my own. And there's a lot of stories I have about how she tried every trick in the book to make me quit. I'm sharing some of them here. She was my manager, and she was in charge of allocating work. Malicious compliance number 1. She starts piling on more work on me than any other member of the team. I was happy to comply. And here's the thing. She didn't know that as part of my contract, I would be paid 1.5 times the hourly rate for every hour I worked overtime, and 2 times the hourly rate if any work was allocated to me over weekends or holidays. Every time she tried to ruin my weekend by calling me to the office, I happily complied. This continued until the time I left the organization, and I told her how much extra money she helped me make. Malicious compliance number 2. After the long commute to work, I used to be hungry, so I developed the habit of stopping at the food court to pick up a glass of fresh fruit juice to carry with me to work. My manager thought that this way she could harass me without actually seeming to do so. So she sends a notice that bringing liquids to the office was a hazard. Ironically, she used to have coffee delivered to her desk 3 times a day. Well, I pointed out that the rule applied to her as well, and if I can't have my juice, she can't have her coffee. She had to spend an extra unpaid hour at work every time she wanted her special coffee. Meanwhile, I was happy to sit in the food court, drink my glass of fresh fruit juice, eat some snacks, and then begin my workday half an hour later than usual. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious-compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where OP's boss actually calls the cops when OP quits. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.